We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet to share these conversations on the Vegan Compass podcast.
We extend our respect to elders past and present, as well as any of our listeners and guests. Hello and welcome to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change. We are your hosts, Rick Allport and Mackenzie Cross.
From wherever you're listening, please be sure to like and subscribe to support this podcast. Now to the episode. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vegan Compass podcast. It's been a little while since we've done a recording. Our last few guests, we recorded them in bulk, so it's nice to be back in front of the mics with you, Rick. How are you today?
I'm good, and it's another, well, not so early morning setup, but it's early for me. But it's good. We're here, for a very good podcast interview. So I've actually heard this gentleman in a podcast just recently, and fascinating information that we're going to get.
Yeah, and I met him recently at the Brisbane Vegan Expo. So Forest Nash, welcome to the podcast.
So Forrest, I have two questions for you. Who are you and what do you do?
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show today, Rick and Mackenzie. It's great to chat with you. And to answer your question a little bit about myself. So I am a vegan fitness and nutrition coach. And so I specialize in helping people build muscle and lose fat to get in the best shape of their lives on a plant-based diet. And I'm also a vegan athlete myself personally. So I'm a drug-free natural bodybuilder on the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team, which is the largest organization of vegan athletes in the world. And so my mission and my aim through both of those avenues as both a coach and a vegan athlete is really one and the same, which is to help spread the vegan message and vegan lifestyle using health and fitness as my platform. And so that's kind of my purpose and passion in life, and something that I feel really privileged to be able to do for a living, and to use the knowledge and experience that I've gained over the lifetime that I've had as a plant-based athlete myself to help other people, hopefully along their journeys, help inspire others, but really to help create kind of an army of fit vegan role models that will then go out into their own communities, help to inspire people, break down stereotypes, and kind of spread the vegan message far and wide and create a ripple effect of positive change that radiates out into the world. So that's what I'm all about. That's what I do every day. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do what I love for a living.
Yeah, great. That's really exciting. And I think breaking stereotypes is such a big part of veganism, because unfortunately as vegans, we do cop a lot of those stereotypes from non-vegans. And I think it's a whole other arena when you're talking about fitness and stereotypes.
And I love the fact that you mentioned the drug-free aspect, because I see a lot of trolls online who, when people like yourself put up images of how amazing you look, and they're going, oh, obviously it's steroids. And then I think back to Billy Simmons, who was Mr. Universe Natural. And you just go, why don't these people understand that what they're talking about is a load of crap? So thank you for being such an outstanding role model.
So you were raised a vegetarian from birth. That's quite interesting and unique. What was it like growing up without meat, and how did that shape your outlook on health and ethics growing up?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. And I do feel very fortunate to have had the upbringing that I did, and very grateful to my parents for giving me that start in life. I feel like being raised vegetarian and as an ethical vegetarian from birth really gave me a tremendous kind of a head start on the path that I now walk in my adult life, and gave me really kind of a solid foundation and baseline to build from, both from an ethical standpoint, but of course also like having a healthy lifestyle. In addition to being vegetarian, my parents were also, folks who ate a healthy diet. We ate lots of whole plant foods when I was growing up. We believed in keeping active, and were, non-drinkers, non-smokers, didn't use drugs, anything like that. Just like you were mentioning earlier, Rick, being drug-free as an athlete, but also like in my life in general, is something that's really important to me as just part of the kind of healthy lifestyle that I choose to cultivate for myself. And so I feel, like I just have a tremendous kind of blessing in that area to have grown up in that way, especially, growing up in the US where sort of the standard diet and lifestyle is quite different to that. And so that's something that I've carried on with me throughout my entire life so far. And of course, I've kind of learned and grown and evolved and built upon that foundation over time. I'm not just vegetarian now, but been vegan for well over 10 years. And I've learned a lot about nutrition and training and longevity. And so that's something that I continue to kind of incorporate into my lifestyle, and that develops and evolves over time. But that same overarching principle has been there the whole time, which is having a lifestyle that's, of course, ethically aligned, but also one that's healthy. And that's the lifestyle that I will no doubt continue to cultivate for the rest of my life.
That's really quite amazing. And I love the fact that you have been all your life drug-free, alcohol-free, living like a really healthy lifestyle. Kudos to your parents for doing that. Unfortunately, my life was brought up in rock and roll and all the things that go along with that. So, that's a bit of a shame. But you made the switch from vegetarian to vegan in around 2015. What actually inspired that change?
Yeah, for sure. So it was kind of a combination of factors that inspired me to go vegan. And it was interesting in my family when I was growing up, because we were actually lacto-vegetarian is what it was called specifically. And so in addition to not eating meat or poultry or fish or anything like that, we also didn't consume eggs. And so the only animal products that I actually had growing up was just dairy products like milk and cheese and butter and stuff like that. And so what I found was, as I got older and I got interested in nutrition and health and fitness, and I started working out, and I was paying more attention to what I was putting into my body. And what I realized was that the dairy products that I was consuming didn't really agree with me very well. Like I would feel, sometimes bloated or have indigestion, or maybe, break out with acne or get congested, different things like that when I would consume dairy. And of course that makes sense because I was not a baby cow. And so I realized that I actually felt better not having those foods in my diet. And I'm also the sort of person where if I'm going to do something, I like to do it 100%. And so it made sense to me, because I was already eating like a 90+% plant-based diet, to go all the way and just, go on a fully vegan diet and lifestyle. And I was already at the time interested in training. And so I had a little bit of concern around protein, because of course I was sourcing some of my protein from animal products like whey protein, Greek yogurt, and things like that. And so, I did some research. I could see that there were, other plant-based alternatives out there, and also that there were folks already. Of course, there's far more nowadays online, but even back then, 10 years ago, there were already some people out there who were doing vegan bodybuilding and who were public about it and kind of documenting their journeys online. And so that was very inspiring for me as well, to see like, if other people can do this, then, it's something that I want to try and do too. And I'll give a special shout out to my friend Derek Treesize, who is probably the person who really inspired me the most to make the switch to a fully vegan diet. He and his wife run a website called Vegan Muscle and Fitness, and they're actually based in Richmond, Virginia, which is not far from where I grew up in the US. And so he was someone that I actually had the opportunity to meet early on in my vegan journey. And we ended up actually working together for a while. And I'm proud to say that we're good friends to this day. And so he was one of the kind of avant-garde vegan athletes, one of the trailblazers who really showed that it was possible to excel as an athlete, because he was actually a pro natural bodybuilder himself as a longtime vegan. And so that was really cool to see that there were other folks out there that were already doing it. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot. And yeah, made the switch back in 2015. And it was the best decision I've ever made in my life. Of course, since then, I've learned a lot more about not only the health benefits, but of course, the ethical benefits, environmental benefits of the vegan lifestyle. And so my commitment and conviction has only gotten stronger over time. And I wish I had made the switch sooner, but I think we probably all feel that way.
Absolutely, we all do. It's probably the most common thing we hear people say. I was going to ask if you've always been interested in health and fitness. I think you've kind of answered that already with your upbringing, but was there a pivotal moment that sparked your interest in bodybuilding?
Yeah, for sure. So I don't know if it was a specific pivotal moment, but as you said, like I was an active kid growing up, like in addition to being raised vegetarian, my brother and I were also homeschooled. And so we had kind of an unconventional childhood in that regard as well. And where my parents lived was actually kind of in this really nice natural setting where they basically live out in the middle of nowhere in the woods in Virginia. And so like my brother and I were just running around out in the woods and like going swimming, doing all this crazy stuff. It was kind of an idyllic childhood looking back on it. And so I was always active, like, basically from an early age throughout my life. But I was also always kind of a skinnier kid growing up. Like I just naturally had a high metabolism. So it was harder for me to put on weight. I had to eat a lot of food in order to do that. And so I decided when I turned 15, I was like, okay, I'm going to start working out. I want to try and just see if I can bulk up, build my body a bit. And so that's what I did. And then what ended up happening was I just fell in love with the training process. And it's something that I've ended up continuing ever since then. And I'm now in my 20th year of training, believe it or not. So I've been at it for quite a long time at this point. I never stopped. And it's something that I believe I will certainly continue for the rest of my life.
That's amazing. What a brilliant and idyllic childhood. Like to grow up in that atmosphere is seriously one of the best ways that you could have done it. So again, how brilliant are your parents to be able to do that. But with everything you've done, and with everything that you've done, and this is an amazing life so far, what motivated you to step onto the bodybuilding stage for the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. And it kind of follows along from what I was mentioning earlier when I made the switch to vegan. And I was actually, then I had the opportunity to work for my friend Derek Treesize. He has a vegan personal training studio in Richmond, Virginia. And so I was living and working there at the time. This was back in 2016 and 2017. And I actually got the opportunity in 2017 to join the PlantBuilt team that I mentioned earlier. So it's this team of vegan athletes that I'm now part of. And Derek was part of that team already. And so I was able to basically, with his recommendation, I had the opportunity to compete alongside them as one of the athletes on the team. And so that was an opportunity I was not going to pass up for sure. And I had been thinking about competing for a long time. I'd been training for well over 10 years already at that point, but I'd never stepped on stage. And so to have the opportunity to do that as something, part of something bigger than myself, where I'm part of this team of vegan athletes that included a lot of folks that I had been following for years and really looked up to and were kind of like my heroes, just, seemed like that was an incredible way to do it. And so that's what I did. And so, yeah, I had my first sort of debut bodybuilding competition was back in 2017 with the PlantBuilt team, and that was an incredible experience.
Yeah, congratulations. I can only imagine how much work goes into it behind the scenes to get your physique to a stage, competitive level. And with that, you've competed and won against non-vegan athletes. So how did it feel to kind of prove those stereotypes wrong, that plant-based athletes can exceed at that high level?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, it felt just probably about as you could imagine. It was an incredible experience. It felt amazing. And I actually was fortunate in that first show that I did back in 2017 with the PlantBuilt team. I actually ended up winning my class in that particular competition. And so to step on stage to represent with this whole team of, several dozen other vegan athletes behind me, and to actually end up bringing home a first place trophy in my first ever competition, it was without question, and to this day, one of the proudest moments of my life. And I think that will remain true for the rest of my life for sure.
And congratulations first up for doing that. Like, that's incredible. And it just suddenly made me think back to the movie The Game Changers, and just the amount of just the amazing detail they went into in The Game Changers, and showing how whole food plant-based diet can absolutely change your body, your mind, your whole psyche. So it's really brilliant that you guys are out there doing it. But as you've mentioned, you're part of the team PlantBuilt. Can you tell us more about that and what it means to be part of that community?
Yeah, absolutely. So the PlantBuilt team, which is now, it's known as the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team. So we have kind of a parent organization, which is Vegan Strong, that sponsors the team for the last 4 years or so. PlantBuilt existed prior to that, but now it's part of the sort of Vegan Strong family. And so basically what it is this team of vegan athletes. It's based in the US, but we have folks that compete from all over the world. So people come from like Canada, Europe, got a couple of athletes from Brazil, myself and a couple others have come from Australia to compete as well. And basically the goal is very similar to like what they were highlighting in the Game Changers documentary, to show that you can be really strong and fit and successful and excel as an athlete on a plant-based diet. And so we have athletes that compete in a variety of different kind of strength and physique sports. So like myself personally, I was competing in natural bodybuilding, and all of the athletes on the PlantBuilt team are drug-free natural athletes, by the way, and we compete in drug-tested competitions. So like we have the test results to prove that. But we also have folks that compete in other sports like powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit, and kettlebell sports. So all of these sports that really require a high degree of athleticism, but also specifically, a higher amount of strength and muscle mass and things of that nature. And so our goal is to prove that you can indeed compete at a high level and win on a plant-based diet. And that's what we're all about.
That's amazing. Well, you're all definitely proving that, and being amazing role models for that message. You mentioned as well earlier on that you're a personal trainer and a nutrition coach, and you're living here in Australia now. So could you tell us what kind of clients you're working with at the moment?
Yeah, for sure. So I do work, and I worked for many years as a personal trainer, and I now work actually as an online fitness and nutrition coach. So my business is fully remote, which is great because I can actually then work with clients from all over the world. But my niche, of course, within the fitness industry is plant-based nutrition, and specifically helping people who want to change their body composition on a plant-based diet. So helping people build muscle or lose fat to get in better shape. And so, of course, that dovetails very well with the life experience that I've had as a plant-based athlete and vegan bodybuilder myself. But that means, of course, the majority of the clients that I work with are folks who are vegan or vegetarian, but I am also open to working with people who are not yet fully plant-based, but they're interested in moving in that direction. And I think it's actually really important to do that because I want to meet people where they are. Of course, not everyone is already going to be vegan, but if they are interested in adopting a more plant-based diet, I want to help them out in whatever way that I can in order to make sure that that journey is sort of as seamless as it can be for them, and also that the lifestyle changes that they're making are sustainable and something that they will be able to continue with for the long term.
I take my hat off to you as well, because not only are you working with plant-based or vegan people, you're reaching out to people who are non-vegan or willing to try and make the change. So that's pretty incredible in its own. But as a coach, what's your philosophy in helping clients to actually achieve their ultimate successes?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say my my coaching philosophy, or kind of how I approach it when I'm working with clients, is I'm very big on long-term sustainability and on having a healthy lifestyle overall. And I think that's something that's really important to keep at the forefront, particularly when it comes to health and fitness goals like building muscle or losing body fat, for example, which is what I specialize in helping people with. Because I've observed that oftentimes in the fitness industry in particular, people tend to have kind of unrealistic expectations of what they want to achieve or the time frame in which they want to achieve certain goals, like losing weight, for example. People tend to be in a hurry when it comes to achieving their fitness goals. And unfortunately, that can sometimes lead them to take sort of unhealthy or unsustainable measures, like, eating very little, or, doing excessive amounts of training that are unsustainable, or you might end up, feeling kind of beat up and burned out afterwards. And so what I try to do with my clients, of course, is to strike a balance where we're moving in the direction that they want to go. We're helping them achieve their goals, and they're making notable progress from week to week. It's a very results-oriented process, but at the same time, doing it in a way that is going to be healthy and sustainable for the long term, so that they will be able to not only achieve the goals that they have, but importantly, be able to keep their results forever. Because of course, that's what most people want. We don't want to lose weight just like rapidly on some sort of a crash diet and then end up gaining it back. But unfortunately, that is what happens to a lot of people nowadays in the kind of fitness, and particularly in the weight loss world. Most people are successful in losing weight, but the majority of them are not successful in actually maintaining that weight loss. And so that's something that I really try to build into everything that I do when I'm working with clients, taking that long-term approach. And sometimes, I have to have some conversations with people and kind of, readjust expectations and stuff like that. It can be a little bit tricky because people have these ideas like, okay, I want to, just start dieting, and I'm going to keep pushing until I get there, and, not take breaks, or, go at a certain pace, or whatever the case may be. But usually, through open communication and kind of sharing a bit of information and sort of evidence and things like that with clients, we can strike a balance there where we're able to achieve the goals that they have, but do it in a way that, again, you're not going to end up feeling fried on the other side of it. And unfortunately, that is something that I see, I wouldn't say a lot, but to some extent in the fitness industry nowadays. There are some coaches out there where they're really into kind of like the transformations and having these crazy like before and after pictures and stuff like that. And so they may advise their clients to take kind of unsustainable measures to, lose like 20 kilos in 12 weeks or whatever the case may be, some crazy stuff. But then on the other side of that, the client is kind of beat up and burned out, and they may end up gaining the weight back. But it's like after the after photo was taken, you don't necessarily see what happens beyond that. And so that's what I try to do in my coaching practice. And I find that works really well, and it does indeed produce sustainable results for the long term. And then in terms of kind of my coaching style and how I interact with my clients as well, I tend to favor kind of, the positive reinforcement. I'm very supportive and encouraging. I don't tend to be kind of like a drill sergeant. I'm going to be yelling at people or telling them off, because in my experience, people tend to beat themselves up enough or more than enough already when it comes to like diet adherence and losing weight and stuff like that. And what they really actually need is someone in their corner who says, hey, you know what? It's okay. You don't have to be perfect. Just do the best you can. There will always be things that come up. Life throws a spanner in the works sometimes. But as long as you keep moving forward, you keep doing the best you can and take note of the results, we'll adjust our approach as needed over time. And we can make really, really good progress in that way. And so that's how I really approach it when it comes to coaching clients. And I find that works really well. And it's also, it's very fulfilling and rewarding for me because I have a great rapport with my clients. It's kind of like, I check in with my clients every week, and it's just kind of like I'm having a chat to a friend. It's not like some weird dynamic where I'm telling them off or, anything like that. It's very much of like a collaborative team effort, if that makes sense.
Well, it's really interesting because, you're mentioning people losing weight really quickly and then gaining it again. I was reading articles about the TV show The Biggest Loser.
Have you watched the new Netflix documentary?
No, I haven't as yet.
It's really good.
Yeah, because so many of the people, in fact, the vast majority of people who have lost weight on that show in a horrifically quick time have all put it back on, if not more. So really interesting what you're saying about that.
And I think this is the perspective that we need nowadays. It's health and fitness, but not from a body shaming perspective. It's from an empowerment perspective, which is just really what we need. And I wish there's more people out there doing it with your philosophy. Yeah. So segueing a little bit, many people still believe that it's hard to gain muscle on a plant-based diet. So what do you say to those people?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say was maybe just, a little proof is in the pudding. I find that goes a long way. And interestingly enough, people don't tend to say that to me very much. It is something that you hear like reading online and those sorts of things. But yeah, I think, again, setting a good example can be really helpful in that regard, because if, literally like you can see that people are doing it, then it gets a lot harder to make those arguments. But another thing I'll say about that, like when it comes to building muscle on any diet, it's hard. It takes work for sure. And so that's not something that I would want to discount. It's not like it's easy to build muscle. The world's not full of people who are walking around as professional bodybuilders, and there's good reason for that. It's a serious undertaking, but I would say it's no less doable on a plant-based diet than on any other diet. You can absolutely achieve just the same level of fitness and muscularity and athletic prowess on a vegan diet as you can if you're eating animal products. But the thing is that I think for a lot of folks makes it seem like it's more difficult is just that it's different. It's unfamiliar. And so if you're in kind of the mainstream fitness world, you have these ideas about, okay, if you want to build muscle, you have to eat a lot of meat to get protein, kind of the standard chicken and broccoli type of diet and all those sorts of things. And that's what people know, and that's what they've done for a long time. And they can see that like that is indeed a path to building muscle, like that can do it. But that doesn't mean that it's the only way to do it, right? And so a plant-based diet can absolutely provide all the protein, all the nutrients, all the calories that we need to build muscle, to lose fat, to get into great shape. But it's just a matter of knowing how to structure your diet and what foods to incorporate and kind of how to balance that in order to achieve the goals that you have. And that's where most folks probably run into some confusion or uncertainty. And so then they feel like, oh, like how can you do that? Like that can't be a thing. But indeed it is. And so that's something where once you know how to do it, which I do, and I'm very well versed in that, it's what I do for a living and something I've done for many years. once you know how to do it, it's just like any other diet. It's just a matter of managing your calorie intake, your macronutrient intake, your carbs, fats, and protein, and so on. And you can do that whether you're eating a vegan diet or any other diet. And so that's what I do, of course, in my own kind of fitness and athletic goals. And that's what I help my clients do as well. And yeah, absolutely, it works, I would say, just as well when it comes to building muscle. I'm not going to make the claim that like you're going to build more muscle on a vegan diet, but you can absolutely achieve just the same results in a way that's going to be healthier for you in the long term, but also, of course, better for the environment, much better for the animals that you're leaving off your plate. And so there's really nothing but upside as far as I'm concerned.
It's such an amazing philosophy and thoughts behind everything that goes into basically vegan plant-based bodybuilding. A lot of things I haven't thought about, and you're really sort of making some very good, valid points here. But I want to take it sideways a little bit. And I was just listening to your interview with on another podcast, Well with Felicia, and I think that everybody should listen into Felicia's podcast. She does some amazing stuff, but it was a really, really good interview. But you talked about caloric deficit. Now, this is probably more a personal question for me. How do time poor people manage to do caloric deficit? Because I work probably way too much, and the idea of trying to get into some sort of caloric balance is even difficult.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so just maybe to define the terms a little bit for listeners who might not be familiar, on that podcast with Felicia, we were talking about weight loss. And so the way we would typically set up a diet for someone who wants to lose weight is by creating a caloric deficit, as you mentioned. And that just means you're consuming fewer calories than you're burning over the course of a day and a week, for example. And that's what is going to drive weight loss and fat loss to occur, because the body will then tap into its own tissue in the form of body fat to get the extra energy that it needs that's not being supplied from the diet. And so creating a calorie deficit is the way to go for anyone who wants to lose weight, for sure. Of course, we want to create a moderate caloric deficit where you're not losing weight too quickly, like we were talking about earlier. And as I mentioned on that podcast with Felicia as well, typically we don't want to lose more than like 1% of your total body weight per week, but even going slower than that, like 0.5% of your total body weight per week. For most folks, that might be like 0.5 kilo per week or somewhere in there. Anywhere in that range can be a really good kind of healthy and sustainable rate of weight loss. And so when it comes to creating a caloric deficit, as you were kind of asking there, Rick, oftentimes a good place to start can actually be just to track what you're consuming, kind of keep track of your diet in some capacity. And that can be a really eye-opening experience. It makes you more engaged in the process of what you're putting into your body. Oftentimes, if we're paying attention, we're tracking what we're eating, we tend to just make better and healthier food choices as a result, because we're just more tuned in. But also, if we choose to, we can actually kind of get into a little bit more detail of looking at how many calories you're actually consuming, as well as the macronutrient breakdown of those foods that we're eating. And that gives us some really good data then, where we can see, okay, like this is how many calories you're eating at the moment. Let's say, for example, maybe you're maintaining your weight like 2,500 calories a day. That would be an example of, kind of being in a caloric balance, as you said. And then if you want to get into a caloric deficit, it's just a matter of reducing that by a few hundred calories per day. And so then you might eat like 2,000 calories, for example, create a calorie deficit of 500 calories per day, and that will typically produce a solid rate of weight loss over the course of a week. You might expect to lose about 0.5 kilo or 500 grams. And so that can be a handy way to visualize it if we think about kind of whatever your baseline calorie intake is, which for most folks, however much you're eating currently, is going to be close to your maintenance intake, because that's what the body will usually try to do, is kind of maintain homeostasis by default. And then if we were to subtract out, basically for every 100 calories or so that we go below maintenance, you can expect to lose about 100 grams in the course of a week. And I wouldn't recommend taking out just 100 or 200 calories usually, because if it's that small of a change, sometimes the body will just kind of pick up the slack and you might not lose as much weight as you expect. But if we take out 300, 400, 500 calories a day below your maintenance intake, then that will give us a solid calorie deficit where you can lose weight. You can see the numbers are trending down on the scale, and that will allow you to move in the direction that you want to go. But again, going at a pace that's sustainable, so you don't feel like you're starving yourself and you don't get too burned out along the way. And so that's kind of how I would recommend starting for someone who's interested in exploring that further. And the good news is there are some really powerful tools that we have available that are free to use that make that process a lot easier. So for anyone who's interested in tracking their diet, I recommend using an app called MyFitnessPal. It's the app that I use myself personally, and a lot of my clients use it as well. And it's actually the most popular diet tracking app in the world for good reason. Basically, the way it works is it has a really comprehensive database of foods in the app, including vegan foods and just about anything you can think of to eat, whether you're in Australia or the US. It's very well populated. And so all you have to do is plug in basically what foods you're eating and how much, and the app will do all the work for you of crunching the numbers. So it kind of totals up what your calorie intake is, and also the breakdown of your macronutrients. So your protein, carbs, fats, and so on. And of course, when I'm working with clients, we set targets for all of those. So we make sure that they're eating in a way that's going to support the goals that they have. But even just for someone who's interested in kind of learning more about their diet, maybe getting a handle on it, figuring out how to get into that calorie deficit to lose weight, starting by tracking your diet can be really helpful because it just gives you a clear picture of what you're eating. And then oftentimes you can see like, oh, maybe I'm having some snacks here and there, maybe some processed food, some vegan junk food, whatever it may be. That's kind of low hanging fruit that you can just start to swap out, maybe making some healthier choices instead. And that will help you to start moving in that direction that you want to go as far as losing weight.
So with the caloric deficit, that includes some sort of like physical exercise to get you below that, because time poor people like me, there is just not a lot of time in the day to actually incorporate a lot of physical exercise. Is there any way to actually get that balance?
Yeah, great question. So doing physical activity and exercise can indeed be part of how we get into a calorie deficit. But as you said, exercise takes time if you don't have a lot of time to do it. And even if time isn't a factor, the most powerful component that we have in creating a calorie deficit is always going to be controlling the calorie intake. So you can think about your energy balance. We kind of have calories in on one hand, what you're consuming, and then calories out on the other side of what you're burning through your physical activity and exercise, and just the calories that your body burns throughout the day just to keep you alive, keep things ticking along. And what we can do is we can either reduce the amount that we're consuming, or you can increase how much activity you're doing to burn more calories. But controlling that calories inside is almost always going to be more impactful, because exercise does burn calories, but people often tend to overestimate how many calories that burns. An example I like to use, this was a few years ago, I was doing a talk for an audience in New York City, and there's this really great vegan donut shop that's super famous in New York called Dunwell Donuts. And so I said to the audience, look, if you go down to Dunwell Donuts and you just smash one of those donuts, I wouldn't blame you, they're amazing. But if you think, okay, I'm just going to do more exercise to burn that many calories, you can indeed do that. But in order to burn off that many calories as what you get from a donut, you have to go and climb all the stairs to get to the top of the Empire State Building. And so it's like, can you do that? Yes, but it's not easy to do that. And so for that reason, it's always a good idea to focus more on that calories inside. And that's where tracking your diet, again, can be super helpful, because you can actually see how many calories you're consuming, and you can also start to identify which foods are more calorie dense. So you might be like, oh wow, like I'm eating a lot of peanut butter or Nuttelex or dried fruit or whatever it may be that's quite high in calories, and you can just swap that out for something that's a little bit more calorie dilute. And so you can still have a snack and something that's going to keep you feeling satiated, so you're not starving all the time, but getting in fewer calories that way. And so that's typically what I would recommend as a starting point. And the nice thing about eating less is like it does, it can take a little bit of self-discipline, a little bit of planning with your diet, but it doesn't take more time. It's like you spend maybe the same amount of time, maybe even less time if you're eating less, particularly like if you're doing some meal planning ahead of time, batch cooking some meals, that can be a really helpful strategy as well. And if you're super time poor, there's even great, plant-based companies now where you can order ready-made meals that are kind of healthy, macro-friendly. They'll send them right to your door. Like Solara is a good example of one that a lot of my clients use and have had good success with. I'm not affiliated with them, but they make decent meals. And they will actually send you meals that are low in calories. They've got plenty of protein in them, and they're ready to go. You just heat it up and eat it. And so even if you're time poor, stuff like that can really come in handy when it comes to staying on track with your diet.
These are great pieces of advice. I'm so glad you brought this question, Rick. I think this is going to be something that's really useful for a lot of people. So many of us in the animal rights movement are really time poor. We give all of our energy to the animals and sort of neglect self-care. So I think these are some great tips that we can all take on board just to live healthier, because we have to look after ourselves as well if we want to be around advocating for animals for the long term.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say there was some altruistic, overtone in what I'm asking, but it was really a personal question. But it does relate to a lot of people, especially in the vegan activism world. So yeah, thank you. That's actually explained better than anybody else has ever explained it. You've explained it so beautifully. Thank you.
One thing I would add to that as well, I think what you said a moment ago was spot on, Mackenzie, particularly, folks who are vegan, who are in the animal rights community. We tend to, have that kind of caretaking mindset and mentality. We want to take care of others. We want to take care of the animals, of course, because they're, sort of defenseless in a sense, like they need our advocacy for sure. But the thing that you said is so true, which is that we have to also take care of ourselves so that we can continue to show up and do the work that we're passionate about of helping animals. Because if you just work all the time and like you're not eating healthy, you're not sleeping enough, you run yourself into the ground, eventually you're going to burn out. It's kind of the same phenomenon as we were talking about earlier with folks who are interested in losing weight. The same thing is true with kind of work-life balance. You want to make sure that you are attending to your own recovery and maintaining your own health so that you can keep going for the long term. So I think that's a really big component of it. And it can be useful to keep that in mind, because then it kind of shifts your thinking about it. It's not like you're being selfish by taking care of yourself. It's actually enabling you to then have the best possible impact over the long term when it comes to helping animals. Because if you're around for a long time and you're healthy and vibrant, and you have a lot of energy, you're going to be able to do more good overall. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind, carve out that time to take care of yourself as well as others. And one thing I would say, just kind of a final note on that, for folks who are interested in losing weight, this is something that I talked about more in depth on that podcast with Felicia, so definitely worth giving that a listen as well. But if you are trying to lose weight, even if you don't have a ton of time available, I would recommend for sure doing some sort of resistance training as part of your weekly routine. It can even just be 2 or 3 times a week, maybe 20, 30 minutes. Doesn't have to be a lot of time, but that's going to be really impactful. Even if you don't want to be a bodybuilder, you're not trying to build muscle, doing resistance training is super important for anyone who wants to lose weight and lose body fat. And I'm planning to make a post about this on social media later today. But doing resistance training makes sure that you get to keep all the muscle that you already have, because you're using it in a rigorous way. And so then when you're losing weight, you can lose the same 5 kilos, for example, but if you just do it by eating less, maybe doing cardio, restricting calories, you could lose, 3 or 4 kilos of body fat for sure. But unfortunately, you might lose a little bit of muscle along with it. And so resistance training actually makes a big difference in the end results that you'll achieve, even with the same amount of weight loss, because if you're doing your resistance training, and also if you're eating plenty of protein, you can make sure that you're maintaining all of the muscle mass that you have, which is a really good idea just for long-term health and longevity. And then all of that weight, if you lose 5 kilos, for example, all of that will come from body fat. And so then you actually end up looking leaner and stronger at the end of that process.
That's a really important point. And I guess I just wanted to reiterate too that you don't necessarily need a gym membership or to spend a lot of money. You could just get some resistance bands and do a workout at home, or just 1 or 2 kettlebells of different weights, and you've got the ability to work out for 20 or 30 minutes at home. You don't need to drive to the gym. You don't need to spend hours in the gym. If bodybuilding isn't your goal and you just want to lose a bit of weight and keep your muscle tone.
100%. And that's so true. Like, working out at home is such a viable option for a lot of folks nowadays, especially if you're time poor. It can be really efficient because you don't have to worry about commuting to a gym. You don't have to pay for a gym membership. You can do a lot just with body weight exercises. And then if you just have some basic equipment at home, it could be some resistance bands, like you said, Mackenzie. It could be some kettlebells, maybe, a set of adjustable dumbbells goes a long way. And that's the beauty of the work that I do with my clients as well when it comes to online coaching, is they don't have to go to a gym to meet with me to do a personal training session. A lot of my clients just work out at home with equipment similar to what I just mentioned. And of course, we can set up programs for that. And so they can still get really, really good results, but in a way that's just a lot easier for them to slot into their busy schedule.
So this information is just, we've gone sort of sideways in what we've been talking about, but it's just such valuable information.
It was a necessary detour.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love it, and it's really made my mind focus more on what's happening, because now I've got that explanation. It's not like, well, what is this term caloric deficit? How does it work? So thank you for that. But pulling us back into what we were talking about before I did our little segue, how important do you think seeing vegan athletes succeed is shifting mainstream perceptions about veganism?
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think there's a lot of benefit to be had there. I think there's a lot of potential when it comes to sport and athletics and fitness in particular, for those kind of perceptions to change, for some of those stereotypes to be broken down, because unfortunately that is an area where a lot of stereotypes still exist. As I'm sure you guys are familiar, the idea that vegans are kind of like these pale, scrawny weaklings who can just about sum up the energy to get out of bed in the morning. And so I think the more kind of, fit vegan role models we have walking around, whether it's folks like myself or my teammates on the PlantBuilt team, but even just, the clients that I work with and people who are getting in great shape on a plant-based diet, even if they're not, professional athletes, they're not competing in sport or anything like that. Just by having more people out there who are really walking the talk and looking good and feeling good and being vibrant and healthy on a plant-based diet, I think that's actually a really powerful form of kind of advocacy and almost like a passive activism that anyone can do. And that's something I try to do every day of my life, like, wearing vegan t-shirts like the one I'm wearing right now, going to the gym or just out in public. It's a great way to spark conversations with people, to help, broaden people's perspective, break down those stereotypes little by little over time. And so I think, the more people who are out there doing that, the better. It's something that, I really try to contribute to as much as I can, but it's something, again, it's accessible to anyone. And I think it's a case where graduated exposure, just little by little over time, can have a big impact, because you might have a conversation with someone, or you might not even talk to them, but they just like see you wearing a vegan t-shirt and looking good and fit and healthy. And it's just little by little, it kind of gets them more familiar with that idea of like, oh yeah, maybe there's something to this. You can actually be fit and healthy and strong and thrive on a plant-based diet. And eventually, it might take 10 times or 100 times of someone having those little kind of micro exposures like that, but they may eventually end up coming around to it. And so I think that's super powerful kind of on the micro scale, but then particularly when there are things that are kind of, making a bigger splash in the media, like the Game Changers documentary is a great example of that. I remember back when that movie came out, and I have my gym that I train at here in Melbourne, and everybody knew at the, I was kind of like the vegan guy at the gym, because I'm always there wearing vegan t-shirts, and I always be super friendly and approachable. People will come up and, sometimes ask questions about it. But after the Game Changers came out, it was like there were a lot more people that wanted to come up and talk to me and asking me about what I'm doing. And so obviously it was having that effect. It was inspiring people, getting them interested in it. And so I think that's super powerful. And it's great, when we have, different things in the media like that come out that are really advocating for veganism in a compelling way. But also, again, it's something that anyone can do. It's what I try to do with my teammates on the Vegan Strong PlantBuilt team try to do. But it's something that, I wouldn't let that like hold you back. Like just being kind of open and being approachable about the fact that we're vegan, I think is really, really powerful, and it can go a long way.
Absolutely. We're getting to the end of our planned questions, but was there anything else you wanted to touch on before we start wrapping up?
I think we've covered off on things really well. It was a great selection of questions that you guys had, an absolute pleasure chatting with you guys today. But yeah, certainly, as far as questions are concerned, I'm always happy to answer questions. Like if folks are interested in plant-based fitness or nutrition, if they're looking to build muscle, lose fat, whatever it may be, anyone out there who's listening, if they're unsure, or, they just, they have some questions that are unanswered, I would love to help out. And so that's something that I would really encourage anyone to do. You can reach out to me. Of course, I'll share my website and social media and stuff like that. But I always try to make myself available as a resource as much as possible. If you're listening to this and you want to learn more about how to get into better shape on a plant-based diet, I want to help you. That's what I feel like I was put on earth to do. And so I'm more than happy to help out. Sometimes I hear from people and they'll like email me or whatever. They're asking questions or inquiring about my services. And they say something like, oh, I was a little bit intimidated to contact you or whatever, but they did it anyway. And of course, then I always reply, and I'm friendly and approachable, and people are really glad that they did. But I understand that, it can be a little bit uncomfortable. Get outside your comfort zone or what you're familiar with, contacting somebody that you don't know in real life. But I promise you, hopefully it comes across in this conversation, but I'm very sincere about this. I'm very passionate about it, and I would like nothing better than to help anyone who's listening. And so I highly, highly encourage people to take me up on that.
Look, you give so much of yourself, and that's I just love that. It's really refreshing to see people who not only have that professional life and do things for their money, but also give so much of themselves as well, aside from the money factor. But if you could leave listeners with one message, what would it be?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for saying that, Rick. It means a lot to me, but I really, it kind of resonates with how I feel about the position that I'm in my life now, which, again, I feel super fortunate to be in that position. I remember seeing a quote, it was just like on a magnet or something a few weeks ago, and I actually shared it on Instagram at the time, but it said something to the effect of like, the purpose of life is to find your gift, and the meaning of life is to give it away. And I truly feel so grateful, because I feel like I've found my gift. I feel like I have this, kind of this wealth of knowledge and information and experience that I've accumulated over the years and decades as a plant-based athlete and someone who's interested in health and fitness and longevity. And I feel like it would be a disservice to others, to the world, and certainly to the animals, if I were to keep all of that information about kind of this life-changing and potentially life-saving lifestyle that is the vegan lifestyle and the whole food plant-based diet. If I were to keep that to myself, it would be a crying shame. And so I don't want to keep it to myself. I want to shout it from the rooftops. I want to try and help as many people as I can. And so, that's why I'm here talking to you guys today. That's why I do a lot of the things that I do. Of course, I have to make a living as well. And I feel so blessed to be able to do what I love for a living. But it's not about that for me. It's about, I want to help as many people as I can. I want to help as many animals as I can. And of course, help save the planet, hopefully, in the process as well. And so to come back to your original question there after that tangent, if I could leave people with one message, I think, and I was thinking about this beforehand as well, I would say this. If you want to eat a vegan diet, or you're already vegan, or you want to adopt a plant-based lifestyle, but you have health and fitness goals as well, you want to build muscle, lose fat, you want to be a competitive athlete, whatever it may be, don't let that stop you. You can absolutely achieve your goals on a plant-based diet. It's not an impediment at all. It's actually going to be an asset to you in your long-term health and your fitness journey. And so don't let that be something that holds you back. Whether you're already vegan, you think, oh, I don't know how to get in shape, or if you're someone where you're not yet vegan, but you want to go in that direction, but you think, oh, I don't want to lose my gains in the gym. Good news, you don't have to. You don't have to choose. It's not one or the other. You can do both. And there's lots of information out there for free. You can do a little bit of research online, but also, like, there are people like me out there. I mean it, like, message me. I offer free consultations. I'm happy to get on the phone with anyone who's interested in plant-based nutrition. Just have a chat for half an hour, help point you in the right direction. If folks are interested in coaching, that's awesome. But if not, hopefully I can at least get you started on that journey, take away some of the overwhelm, answer some of those questions. But I just want people to know it's very, very doable. I know it can be daunting when you're at the start of a new journey like that, but just take the first step, and I promise you, you'll be so glad you did.
Great advice. I think that's a really nice way to sum it up. But could you just let us know if you've got anything exciting happening in the future, competitions, projects, or collaborations that we can all keep an eye out for?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm not currently, I don't have a current competition that I'm training for at the moment. I may compete again in the future, but I'd say I'm a little bit kind of semi-retired from bodybuilding at this point. I think my focus going forward is going to be more on kind of long-term health and longevity, because that's also something that's very important to me. And there's a little bit of a trade-off, like if you're really maximally focusing on bodybuilding versus longevity. And so I'm in my mid-30s now. Longevity is definitely something that's more on the radar than like when I was 15 when I started training. So that's something I'm kind of weighing up. But for sure, in terms of my future plans, I feel like there's a lot more that I have to offer, and a lot more that I can do as kind of a science communicator, I think is a good way of putting it, just sharing some of this really useful and valuable information with people, with the public, and reaching as many people as I can. And so I was fortunate, I've had some public speaking opportunities, like Mackenzie. I know we were both speaking at the Brisbane Vegan Expo a few weeks ago, which was fantastic. I actually had the opportunity to do a similar talk just like last weekend when I was overseas in the US. Of course, doing podcast appearances and interviews and stuff like this is something that I love to do as well. And so that's something that I really aim to lean into and try to continue to just put myself out there as much as possible, whether it's online and social media, but also doing more of that public speaking, kind of getting outside my comfort zone a little bit, because it's not something that I've historically done that much, But again, I feel like it's, I have almost like a moral obligation to do that, to share this information and experience and knowledge that I have with the world. And it's also, as it turns out, is something I really enjoy doing. And so that's definitely something that I'll be leaning into going forward.
Thank you for being so inspiring. And, again, we love doing this podcast because it just brings out so much information and we walk away going, wow, this is incredible. But where can people follow you online and learn more about your coaching?
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you guys again, Rick and Mackenzie. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. And people can indeed find me online. So my website is pretty simple. It's just my name. So forestnash.com.au, and that'll bring up all of my information about my professional coaching services that I offer. My contact details are on there as well. So, email, phone number, and so on. And then people can also find me on social media. And I am making an effort to be more active on social media now. So you'll definitely, stay tuned for updates there. But on Instagram, I'm just forest.nash. And then my Facebook page for my business as well is just Forest Nash Fitness. And so feel free to connect with me on any of those platforms. Shoot me a message, shoot me an email, whatever it may be. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. Again, I want to help as many people as I can.
Well, thank you so much, Forrest. This has been an amazing conversation with lots of takeaways for our guests, and I hope everyone has enjoyed it. Make sure you comment on Spotify or social media or YouTube. Let us know the biggest takeaways you got from this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Vegan Compass podcast, unveiling truths, inspiring change.
Be sure to follow us on social media at @thevegancompass_podcast. See you next time.